Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. So not long after Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald on camera in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters, a lot of Americans started to have some questions about the Kennedy assassination. It was, you'd have to admit, a pretty extraordinary sequence of events. A lone gunman murders the President of the United States, and then, less than 48 hours later, that lone gunman is himself murdered by another lone gunman. What are the odds of that? It's one thing if you get struck by lightning, rare but possible. But if every member of your family also gets struck by lightning all on different days, you might begin to suspect these are not entirely natural events. But oh, replied the U.S. government, they are. This bizarre chain of killings was all entirely natural. So less than a year after the JFK assassination, the Johnson White House released something called the Warren Commission report. And the report concluded that while their motives remained unclear, both Lee Oswald and Jack Ruby had acted alone. No one helped them. There was no conspiracy of any kind. Case closed. Time to move on. And many Americans did move on. At the time, they had no idea how shoddy and corrupt the Warren Commission was. It would be nearly 50 years before the CIA admitted under duress that, in fact, it had withheld information from investigators about its relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald. But even then, at the time, before that was known, the government's explanation didn't seem entirely plausible, and some people started asking obvious questions about it. It was at that point, as Americans started to doubt the official story, that the term conspiracy theory entered our lexicon. As Professor Lance DeHaven Smith points out in his book on the subject, the term conspiracy theory did not exist as a phrase in everyday American conversation before 1964. In 1964, the year the Warren Commission issued its report, the New York Times published 5 stories in which conspiracy theory appeared. Now today, of course, the term conspiracy theory appears in pretty much every New York Times story about American politics. It's wielded, now as then, as a weapon against anyone who asks questions the government doesn't feel like answering. But despite 60 years of name-calling, those questions have not disappeared. In fact, they have multiplied with time. And here's one of them. In April of 1964, a psychiatrist called Louis Joylan West visited Jack Ruby in his isolation cell in a Dallas jail. According to West's written assessment, he found that Jack Ruby was, quote, technically insane and in need of immediate psychiatric hospitalization. Those are conclusions that, puzzlingly, no one who had spoken to Jack Ruby previously had reached. Ruby had seemed perfectly sane to the people who knew him. Louis Joylan West pronounced him crazy. But what West did not say was that he was working for the CIA at the time. Louis Joylan West was a contract psychiatrist for the spy agency. He was also an expert on mind control and a prominent player in the now infamous MK-Ultra program, in which the CIA gave powerful psychiatric drugs to Americans without their knowledge. So of all the psychiatrists in the world, what in the world was this guy doing in Jack Ruby's prison cell? The media did not seem interested in finding out. In fact, the New York Times, in an extensive 1999 obituary of West, never mentioned the fact that he had worked for the CIA, much less his time in Jack Ruby's cell, which seems relevant. So you can see why non-crazy people would wonder about what really happened, and of course many have wondered. In 1976, long forgotten, the House of Representatives impaneled a special committee to reinvestigate the JFK assassination. Their bipartisan conclusion? Jack Kennedy was almost certainly murdered as the result of a conspiracy. But the question is, a conspiracy by whom? Well, the obvious suspect would be the CIA. Why else would the agency withhold critical evidence from investigators? Is there a benign explanation for that, for maintaining this level of secrecy for this many years? Not that we're aware of. And it is illegal. In 1992, Congress passed the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act. And that act mandated full disclosure of all documents by 2017, 54 years after JFK was killed. The last administration promised to comply fully with that law, but under intense pressure from CIA Director Mike Pompeo, withheld in the end thousands of pages of CIA documents. Today, this afternoon, the Biden administration did exactly the same thing. That would be thousands of pages of documents after nearly 60 years. After the death of every single person involved. But we still can't see them. Clearly, it's not to protect any person. They're all dead. It's to protect an institution. But why? Well, today we decided to find out. We spoke to someone who had access to these still hidden CIA documents, a person who was deeply familiar with what they contain. We asked this person directly, did the CIA have a hand in the murder of John F. Kennedy, an American president? And here's the reply we received verbatim. Quote, the answer is yes. I believe they were involved. It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake. It's hard to imagine a more jarring response than that. Again, this is not a, quote, conspiracy theorist that we spoke to. Not even close. This is someone with direct knowledge of the information that once again is being withheld from the American public. And the answer we received was unequivocal. Yes, the CIA was involved in the assassination of the president. Now, some people will not be surprised to hear that. They suspected it all along. But no matter how you feel about or what you thought about the Kennedy assassination, pause to consider what this means. It means that within the U.S. government, there are forces wholly beyond democratic control. These forces are more powerful than the elected officials that supposedly oversee them. These forces can affect election outcomes. They can even hide their complicity in the murder of an American president. In other words, they can do pretty much anything they want. They constitute a government within a government, mocking by their very existence the idea of democracy. As cynical as we have become after 30 years of watching government officials ignore the voters who employ them, we were shocked to learn this. It's not acceptable. Americans have trusted their government less with every passing year since the killing of John F. Kennedy. Maybe this is why. And people have known this for a long time. The people who knew would include every director of the CIA since November of 1963. And that list would include Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, one of the most sinister and dishonest figures in American life. That list would also include, we are sad to say, our friend Mike Pompeo, who ran the CIA in the last administration. Mike Pompeo knew this. We asked Pompeo to join us tonight, and though he rarely turns down a televised interview, he refused to come. We hope he will reconsider. In the meantime, we are happy to be joined tonight by New York Post columnist Miranda Devine. Miranda, thank you so much for coming on. I don't think we've paused long enough to consider what this means. After 60 years, when every person involved is dead, we can't see classified information about maybe the pivotal event in modern American history. And now we know why.
Well, Tucker, look, you laid it out really well. And, it used to be that conservatives like me dismissed theories from the left about JFK's assassination as just left-wing conspiracy theories. But over time, I think that the left looks as if they were quite justified in not trusting the intelligence services. And I think the WMD pretext for the Iraq War was a red pill, a slowly dawning red pill for me. And so now you just have to look just on a really basic level. You just look at the fact that 30 years ago, Congress, in a unanimous, bipartisan, unequivocal, unambiguous decision, said that all the JFK files have to be made public. Absolutely no reason to keep them back. As you say, it's almost 60 years ago. Everybody involved is dead. You're not worried about sullying reputations or unmasking a spy overseas. No, there can only be two reasons for it. One is that you're trying to protect the CIA against allegations or revelations that it knew more than it made out about Lee Harvey Oswald. It had a huge file on him. They were investigating him or in contact with him before the assassination, and they didn't do enough to save JFK or protect the president. But is that enough to really keep this secret going for 60 years? I mean, the terrible dawning recognition is that really this is about, as you said, protecting the institution. If the CIA was involved in that assassination, that is the reason that you would want to keep that from the American people, because the fury that would erupt, and this is a bipartisan fury, it'd be the one thing that would unite Americans, is an absolute rage at this unaccountable spy agency that has decided that it is going to get involved in murdering, assassinating the duly elected American president. For what reason? You know, there would be such a clean out of the CIA. I don't know if it would even survive. And so the trust in our institutions is already at rock bottom. I think it's a mistake for Mike Pompeo not to come on your show, because all this does is fuel more conspiracy theories. The truth is the best disinfectant. And if the CIA did do this, was involved 60 years ago, then it needs to come clean. We need to have a reckoning.
And just to be clear, that was the assessment of someone we spoke to who was directly and personally familiar with the contents of these documents. It's not someone who read it on the internet. This is someone who had access to the documents. And I have to say, I don't understand, and I agree with you, secrecy abets evil. And the more secrecy you have, the more evil you're likely to have. So we should minimize the amount of secrecy as a general matter. But I don't understand how John Brennan can go on NBC News every day, he was on today, and no one pauses and asks, like, what is this exactly? 60 years, really? And don't give me the sources and methods BS, by the way, son. Like, we're adults here. What's the real reason? Why does no one ask him that?
Well, the more we see characters from the CIA, like John Brennan, like those 51 former intelligence officials who signed that scurrilous letter about Hunter Biden being Russian disinformation, the less impressive they look. These people are in the shadows for a reason, because if you actually saw who they were, look at John Brennan. Would you, knowing what we know now about him, would you really entrust him to run the country's premier spy agency, to have such power to run around the world intervening in other countries' elections? No. So I just don't know what good it does us to have those kind of malevolent people having so much power and using it in our name and causing us all great harm because we don't know what they're doing.
That's right. Transparency can fix it. It's the only thing that can. And I appreciate your assessment tonight. Marina Devine of the New York Post, thank you.
Jim DiEugenio is the author of JFK Revisited and the screenwriter for Oliver Stone. So, Jim, have you looked at these documents, and what are you feeling today?
Well, I had an opportunity to look at some of them, and let me give you an example of what I mean. This is supposed to be a 4-page document. Look at page 2. There's nothing on it, all right? Then look at page 3. There's like one sentence on it. There's another document, and this is a very serious problem that people have. Look at this page. You can barely read it. It's illegible. You know, and I think what people get angry about who are really serious about this subject are that the National Archives has had a very, very long time to go ahead and get this ready. I mean, I'm not talking months. I'm not talking years. I'm talking decades, you know, which they knew that this day was going to come. And yet, you know, and we still get these documents that are so unsatisfactory. All right. Now, let me, if you don't mind, if I can say one of the documents that I thought was so interesting is that the Warren Commission is very puzzled about how Oswald got into the Soviet Union so fast from the city of Helsinki. And they're writing letters to Richard Helms, who was the deputy director of the CIA at the time, asking him about this problem, because there's always been this suspicion that was Oswald a false defector, okay? But they want to know how the heck did Oswald get into the Soviet Union in like 4 days when he was in the capital of Helsinki in Finland? They just can't figure it out. And the reason they can't figure it out is they've queried these other capital cities and their Soviet embassies, and no one could get a visa that fast. So this leads to the question, did Oswald know where to go in order to get into the Soviet Union that quickly? And there's another related problem with this. The Warren Commission says that Oswald had about $700 on him when he went to Europe. When Oswald was there in the city of Helsinki, he stayed at 2, and I'm being conservative, 4-star hotels. The first hotel he stayed at, the Hotel Torney, that was more like a 5-star hotel. That's the kind of place that Nelson Rockefeller and President Hoover, okay, they stayed at.
It doesn't add up. And what does your gut tell you? I know you can't prove everything. What is your gut screaming at you right now?
I want to see the rest of the documents. Let me give you a hint, Jesse, at what should be there, but that's not there. Back during the days of the House Select Committee, a couple of researchers wrote a paper called "Was Oswald an Agent of the CIA?" They declassified 600 pages today from the House Select Committee, and I don't see that one in there. What happened to it? Why is it gone? You know, why can't we see that? You know, and I'm sure Jefferson Morley has some questions also.
Absolutely. Well, again, this is the government spitting on our face, disrespecting us, and we're not surprised because they do this every damn time we ask questions. It's been 3 years since Jeffrey Epstein's death, but details about his underage sexual blackmail ring are still under lock and key. It's one of the biggest scandals in American politics, and there's still so much we don't know. But Primetime has found new evidence buried in a trove of unsealed court documents, including victim depositions, from a defamation lawsuit against Epstein Madam Ghislaine Maxwell. This is Sarah Ransom. She met Epstein when she was a 22-year-old aspiring model trying to make it in New York. And like so many other girls, she ended up getting raped on Epstein Island.
The more he saw you being damaged, the more he enjoyed it, the more it excited him.
This area here reminds me of the evening when I tried to escape the island after I had been raped 3 times that day. You do things.
So here's a photo of the island, and this was right after she says Epstein gave her a naked massage. In a sworn deposition, Ransom described the island like a brothel with lots of teens. And Ghislaine Maxwell was tasked with having enough girls to keep up with Epstein's massive sexual appetite, telling prosecutors, quote, "When I was finished, another girl was called by Ghislaine, and when they had finished, another girl was called." Ransom also confirmed that Epstein kept videotapes of high-profile men raping underage girls as sexual blackmail. She says she saw some of those sex tapes herself, explaining, quote, "When my friend had sexual intercourse with blank and blank, sex tapes were in fact filmed on each occasion by Jeffrey." She also said Epstein was clever. He made sure he wasn't in the video, so it couldn't have been used against him. Ransom says she got her hands on one of those videos and backed it up on, those little thumb drives and sent them to different locations in Europe because she's scared someone from Epstein's inner circle still could get her. So if Sarah has the videos, the FBI has to have them too, right? Yet, the only one that's been arrested is the madam. There's all these high-profile guys on these videos, right? Committing statutory rape, right? So how come nothing's come from that? Something doesn't add up here. We know the FBI let Epstein get away with abuse for over a decade. They even used him as an informant. He helped them with a Bear Stearns investigation. So is the FBI covering for Epstein's rich and powerful friends that abuse the girls? Are they blackmailing people from the tapes for more information? We can only speculate.